Welcome along this Thursday lunchtime to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Colin Watt and I'm joined by Sean from the Celtics Down Under podcast. Sean, how are you?
Good. Yeah, it's pretty hot down here. I'm sure it's quite a contrast with you guys.
You're absolutely rubbing it in, Sean. I'm dying with a cold after running about playing training last night in shorts and t-shirt, and you're just saying how warm it is. That's not fair. Look, JP's in the house and he's even wrapped up.
We are absolutely sweating down here. It's like in the 30s every day.
You're very close to getting muted. JP, how are you?
Hi, good man. What time is it there, Sean?
It's 8:30 p.m.
Wow. Never fails to blow my mind that people are in completely different time zones and you can chat to them like this. But I am all right. I've been watching more of the World Cup, which is, I don't know, I didn't really have that much interest in it at the start. And I found myself, maybe it's the lack of Celtic that's made me want to watch just any random game. But I watched the Morocco game the other night, and what a result. I mean, that's surely one of the biggest shocks ever in the World Cup history. I didn't
tournament of shocks so far.
I didn't watch the aftermath, like the back in the studio or anything like that, so I didn't get any of the details or the patter about it. But I mean, I've not read anything online, but surely to God that's one of the biggest ever shocks. I mean, is that the first time Morocco ever qualified to this level, to this stage of the competition?
I believe so, yes.
Yep.
We've had Ivory Coast and Ghana have both gone to the last 8, I think.
Right.
But it's funny because Morocco, despite being in Africa, are almost a Middle East team because of the kind of Islamic connection. So they're really being backed by all the Qatari and Saudi and Emirati fans at the moment, probably more so than the African fans. It's an interesting one.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a fantastic tournament in my opinion so far. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's still a lot of should the tournament be there, should this have happened, should that have happened. But when they actually look at the football that's been on play, that's, for me, it's been some of the best standard of football at a World Cup I've seen in a long time. You're talking about surprises. Obviously, we saw Saudi Arabia beat Argentina, as you've got the jersey hanging up behind you, JP. Japan beating Germany. Even South Korea coming back to beat Portugal to get themselves through. It's been a tournament of shocks, but it's been a tournament of great football as well. Even some of the 0-0s, you're sitting there going, that wasn't a boring game of football.
Yeah. Australia beating Denmark. That was a big one.
To be fair, that was a bad game. Australia did not play well in that game. But we did play well against Argentina. And I totally agree with what you're saying about the standard being much higher. When you contrast it to, was it the Brazil one, where there was so many games were 0-0 and the average goal scored per game was like 2. The standard is much higher in this game. You even get teams that would be considered an also ran normally, like Saudi Arabia, beating Argentina and deservedly. You know, that goal that, I forget the boy's name that scored the second goal, that was an absolute worthy of a goal that he scored. So there's not too many ditties anymore.
Depends where you're looking.
Miss Croatia you talking about?
But no, it's been a good tournament, but obviously focusing on the Celtic contribution to it, we have just Josip Juranovic left. It was good to see, obviously, the guys getting through to the last 16. Josip, obviously, moving on to the last 8 with Croatia. That'll be a very difficult tie, I think, for Croatia coming up. But we're going to speak about one of the players that sort of stood out for me, certainly, in that Australian team, and that was Aaron Mooy. And we go back to when we signed Aaron back in the summer. And at the time when we were talking about the signing, me, myself included, I didn't think it was a great signing for Celtic. I know, Sean, you guys had really paraded this signing and were speaking about how influential he could be into that Celtic team. And I agree with you now. I've went full 180 on Aaron Mooy since he signed for Celtic. I can see what he offers to the team. But it's a role that only very few players can play. To have the influence in the game without being the quickest, without being the most physically dominant. But if you take sometimes a player like that out of the squad, and I think you kind of notice it, and that's why Australia's played him almost to the death in every game. He's so influential because he's the first one that's there trying to win the ball back, trying to get the attack going forward. Especially when you look at them almost equalising against Argentina the other night. He was the one that was digging in there to try and get that ball going, to get the attack going forward. And there's players like that. I mean, JP, we had Scott Brown, but I don't even think, looking at that, he's a kind of totally different player, despite playing a very similar role.
Yeah, I don't think Scott Brown. I think if Scott Brown had the range of passing that Mooy had, I don't know if we'd have been able to hold on to Scott Brown, put it that way, because I know there's a lot of people that didn't fancy him when he came in, and everyone was questioning the fact that we were signing somebody that was over the age of 30, and kind of because he'd been in China, right? Is that where he'd been?
Yep.
Playing his football.
Shanghai.
I think anybody that gets signed from there, or indeed a manager that comes from there, it feels like they've kind of waved the white flag in their career by going there just for the money, and they're not going there to better themselves as a footballer or anything like that. So there's question marks all over the place about that signing. But rather than just being like blindly loyal to Ange Postecoglou, which maybe there's an element of that, I just completely had trust in the manager. I didn't think that it was a signing that was brought in from behind his back or anything like that. I thought it was clear it was his signing. He wanted the player there. And yet again, Ange Postecoglou has been proved right. I always think it's weird when people jump on a player before they've really had a chance to prove themselves, because all that player can do is shut the likes of us up with their performances and make us look stupid. So I've always been in the camp to give people a chance before they have had the opportunity.
Yeah, and Sean, when you obviously saw Aaron playing a lot closer than what we had, we probably last seen him when he was down at Huddersfield, kind of kicking about the Premiership and the Championship. But there is just something about the style of play. I mean, John Hill comes in here with a good point, saying when Mooy runs, he still looks as if he's walking, and he's very deceiving on the eye. He's one of those players that, if you're maybe watching the game on the television, you don't understand the contribution he puts in to the squad. It's maybe when you're watching him in the flesh, you see his movement and you see how he's always available to get on the ball. And when you're playing the style of football that Ange Postecoglou wants to play, even not being the most technically gifted, having that ability to always want the ball, to always be there to receive the ball, it's all part of that build-up to getting the ball forward.
Yeah, and there was... I do like, he's obviously a very technically gifted player, and what the contributor's saying there about how he kind of glides rather than runs is very accurate because of his technical ability. You know, they say the first 5 yards is in your head, sort of thing. But one thing that he does do sometimes is he gets, I don't want to call it pondersome, like he's almost waiting for things to develop in front of them, and he gets caught in the possession for that reason, because he knows he can make that killer pass. So he's just kind of waiting sometimes for that to open up in front of him. And that kind of, so when it works, it works. Like when we smashed Ross County in the Cup, he was man of the match. And then the next game he plays in the number 6 role against St Mirren, and he gets absolutely exposed by Keanu Bacchus, closing him down every time he tried to get, every time he tried to be doing that, like kind of pausing to think. And after that, Postecoglou moved him into that number 8 role and stuck Matt Riley back in the number 6. So there is something about that lack of pace that is a problem in Scottish games for him. But in terms of technical ability, there's no real question. I mean, how good he is. For me, there's been a tinge of disappointment at first, and that kind of continues to now, and that I still prefer Tom Rogic and would have preferred to have Tom Rogic, and I still miss Big Tam. But Aaron Mooy is good, and he certainly showed up well at the World Cup, when I think probably he's been less pressured than he gets in the SPFL.
And he's not the only one, I think, who's really shown what he can do at the World Cup. Dyson Maeda is another one who has come under fire quite a few times from different groups of the fan base, JP. You take a look at his contribution this season, he's only got 4 goals from 22 games. But the way he played for Japan the other night, the way that the sort of the people in the studio were talking about him as well, it was almost as if it was like a kind of key gemstone to be part of a team that is a high pressing team, and that's what Celtic are built on. But just really not seen it so often from Dyson at Celtic so far this season.
Well, you say that. I think he's probably responsible for potentially wearing opponents down for others to do damage. If you take Dyson Maeda out of some of the victories we've had this season, maybe we don't get those victories without his efforts. I mean, you saw what it was like in that game the other night. He was pressing the keeper from the word go, and the commentators were just like, "Whoa, this guy's made of something." And then the co-commentator, I forget who it was, sort of said, obviously because Japan hadn't scored at that point, and they were like, "Yeah, he gives you all this, gives you all the energy and all the pressing, but what are you sacrificing for that? To have that kind of player? You're obviously, because he's the striker up front, and you're wanting him to score a goal, and then he scores his goal, and the guy kind of has to eat his. I can't remember who it was, but he had to kind of eat his words a bit, because he's like, well, he's given you all that, and he scored a crucial goal, which took it to pens, or led to it going to pens. So a guy sat next to me at one of the European games and said he was a fraud. A Celtic fan, like, openly said, like, I mean, he was a bit drunk and obviously a bit loose with his words, but he was like, that guy's a fraud and all this sort of stuff. And I'm like, he's definitely not a fraud. He might not be the top goal scorer at any point in his career at Celtic, but I think he gives something that not many other. It's like you were saying about Mooy, Postecoglou has assembled a squad of players that have all their own individual attributes who can bring something to the table. That's the way I see it. And when have we ever been blessed, really, with a squad where you've got guys that you can go, oh, he's the best at that, he's really good at that, that's his skill set. There's nobody else in the squad that can do that. And we've kind of got it a bit.
Yeah, and that's what we're saying here. This is a proof that not all signings fit a mould now. When you think back to what your striker would traditionally be sort of bought for, you're talking about he'll come in and he'll score 20, 25 goals a season. And he'll be there and he'll be the sort of poacher in the box, and sometimes he'll be the strong guy that holds up the play. And traditionally, when we used to go away from home in Europe, you were saying, right, who are you going to put up there? Who's going to hold up the ball? Who's going to build up the play? Now, as you're saying, with the sort of technical attributes that some of these players have got, like Maeda, to close down and to run, to run for 90 minutes and to really put pressure on the backlines of defences. It's almost as if we spoke last year about Postecoglou having a plan A, but this is sort of plan A, point 1, point 2, point 3. It's sticking to the same strategy, Sean, but it's adapting to the way that the other team sets up, so that if we've got a defence that we're coming up against that's really slow, then you put Maeda up and you tell him to chase onto it. If you're having a slow or technical game away from home, like Ross County, as you mentioned earlier on, you can play someone like Aaron Mooy in that position and he can control the game. Whereas if you're coming up against sometimes wingers or defenders who like to get further forward and you want to pin them back, if you've got Leila Bada coming down one side and Jota coming down the other, as we've seen in the Derby games so far this season, they don't get a chance to go forward. So it's not changing too much away from Ange's philosophy. It's just suiting the game and the tactics that will be best suited for the opposition.
Yeah, and to be fair, though, in Scotland, there's not as much variance as you get when you go into Europe. That's been our kind of problem, hasn't it? We're in Europe, we're all perspiration and no inspiration, and but in Scotland, the variation's so narrow between teams. I mean, St Mirren did something that was unexpected when they kind of had that medium level block instead of the low block, and then they had their midfielders strangling the space, so the fullbacks usually interact with the wingers, and then they allowed the wingers to go outside, but then suffocated them, stopped them coming inside. So they really did a good job of that, and I'll be interested to see when we play them again if it was a flash in the pan or not. But yeah, the whole the reason that Postecoglou has these players, you're right, is different qualities for different oppositions and different occasions, and it can also just be within a game. And the fact is that he trusts everyone to play the system well enough and bring their own qualities. And I believe he's said in the past, like when you get into the final third, it's almost it's almost kind of, I know it's not, but it certainly, at first it was to be unscripted, to try and do something unexpected, to try and go on instinct. And I know he's kind of built on that since then with his third man runs and things, that sort of thing. But it certainly is something when a player is new to the system that he does look for.
Yeah, I mean, you take a look at the appearances that each of the forwards has played this season. There's only a couple of games in it between you look at Maeda 22 games, Abada 22 games, Jota 17 games, Giakoumakis 21 games. So it's keeping those players fresh, keeping them active in the team, so that when you have to turn to these players, it's not as if they're coming in off the cold, JP. And I think that's sometimes what used to be our biggest problem, is if we picked up an injury here or there, you were getting a guy in that maybe hadn't played 90 minutes for 3 or 4 months. But now everyone seems to be kind of part of a squad. There's no necessarily key players. Everyone has a key role to play in the team now.
I can't remember in my time watching Celtic, I can't remember a squad being so well used as this, in terms of he obviously has his first picks. Usually it's even saying that, you talk about Greg Taylor, he happily puts in Bernabei now, and he'll happily put in Ralston instead of Juranovic. He'll switch about centre halves as well. I don't recall ever having a squad where you kind of do have trust in the majority of the players to come in and fulfil a role and be, like you say, be invested in what's going on. Are not out in the cold. Obviously there's the paper talk about Giakoumakis. We don't know if that's got any substance to it at all, but I wouldn't have thought Giakoumakis is sitting there going, oh, well, I'm not playing week in, week out and playing 90 minutes week in, week out, therefore I'm not happy. I very much doubt that's the case. If he wants to go elsewhere, it's probably because either his agent's angling for a move, or he's thinking about, if I've only got one chance to move again, I better do it now. But I would have thought that's it. It doesn't seem to me like he's an unhappy player in the squad. And to be honest, maybe I'm being naive, but I don't really see many players that are in the first team or in or around the first team being unhappy at what they're currently experiencing with this manager and this side.
Yeah, definitely. Sorry, Sean, on you go.
So I was going to say that's something that like top managers do and have to do nowadays. Big clubs have to manage big squads. If you remember back to when Celtic were stacking up players under the likes of Lennon and Mowbray, the chat that came out publicly was, the squad's getting too big. And I don't know if that was kind of Lawwell doing the strings thing. But it's something that Brendan Rodgers, Claxon, was always good at, was saying stuff like making sure everyone was recognised as playing their role, like even the kit man and the tea lady and all that sort of thing. He'd make sure everyone was applauded and recognised, so that even if you are only playing like 30 to 60 minutes a month, it's important that you know that that's contributing to success. And even if these players aren't starting, or even if they aren't getting regular minutes, they're being a competent opponent in training is a measure, contributes to success. Being ready to absolutely hit the ground running is a measure of success. This is something we've not really had to worry about under the likes of Rodgers and Postecoglou, is when these players come off the bench, they come off and they play. If these players come into the squad after not starting in the previous 4 games, they're ready to play. James Forrest comes in, scores a hat-trick. If you think back to the past, you'd have things like Lee Griffiths coming out and publicly complaining, I can't get fit unless I get a run of starts. Georgios Samaras doing it privately, going and saying to Lennon, if you want me to play well, you have to give me a run of starts. This doesn't happen under Postecoglou. These players are all ready to go before they even set foot on the pitch.
That's a good point.
And when you look at it now, we are still in the process of adding to this squad, especially as we came up against our first what would you call it? Mid-season friendly, not pre-season friendly, mid-season friendly, against Rennes on Saturday. A lot of hush-hush about this game, by the way. There's not been any real confirmation on what time kickoff is, if it's going to be on TV for us to watch. It's almost as if it's going to be a behind closed doors affair, and we'll find out afterwards. I can't remember the last time Celtic played a friendly like that was so sort of publicly known as well, because Rennes came out and already confirmed the tie. So, a bit a strange one. Although, did any of you catch the Almeria Hearts game from Sunday?
I seen what happened. Yeah, it was hilarious, but also tragic at the same time. Did you see it, JP?
I did see the clip on Twitter, but it's not the first time Hearts have had bother in a friendly. Do you remember? Did Craig Levine not stick the head on a fellow player in a pre-season? There was a team. I can't remember who it was. I do remember that. So they've got a history of violence in friendlies.
So maybe Celtic took a look at that and went, we'll maybe just wait and see what happens again, and stick it behind closed doors for 90 minutes, and we'll just give you a score.
I'm just glad I'm not going on I got the bus to Rennes for that game in the Europa League in what?
Game?
No, September 2019 one where did Bayo not get sent off quite harshly? I think Bayo got sent off, and
I remember sending off. Don't remember who it was against.
It was Rennes, and we drew 1-1. And Graham Hogg, that's right, yeah, good shout. That's who Craig Levine stuck the nut on. Either hooked him or stuck the nut on him, one of the two. There was very, very grainy footage released of it from zoomed in from a distance, and you just saw the guy going down. But I got a bus all the way to Rennes. It was from the Gallowgate, it was absolute bedlam on that bus for 24 to 26 hours or something like that. People just talk about our team not stopping. Everybody in that bus did not stop drinking and other things as well. It was just like a non-stop nightclub all the way to Rennes on wheels. An interesting experience.
I always make sure you give the driver a good tip on days like that, because it's absolutely against the law to drink on a bus.
He deserved a medal for that. I tell you, more than a tip, he deserved a medal to wear as a badge of honour for being able to cope with the level of noise and just general mayhem. I don't know. You have to have a certain screw loose to go in a bus for that long to go and watch a football team play for an hour and a half and then basically get the bus straight back after the game. There was two drivers, so one did the one the way there, and then the other one did, or they swapped it about.
I don't know if this is true from Red Scotland, but he's coming in saying my cousin was the driver of one of those buses. He was as drunk as the passengers. No joke.
I mean,
I do not advocate that at all, but would that have been possible, JP?
I'm glad I'm finding that out now and not at the time, because I dare say I would have been fearful for my life if that was the case. But I really don't think it is true. Okay. Right. Well, maybe I'll
don't say the name, Red. We're not grasses on here. Don't give it the names.
I'll reevaluate my methods of transport for the next European game.
But what you were just saying there, what was it? A non-stop nightclub to Rennes. That sounds as if it could be one of Kevin Graham's latest poems. If you just recollect the story, he'll put it into poetry. No, so obviously Rennes coming up on Saturday, and we're talking about signings fitting a mould. We've obviously brought in Yuki Kobayashi and also Alistair Johnston. Alistair Johnston coming in as a right back. We believe it will be Josip Juranovic's replacement. JP, I've seen a couple of people saying, Canadian internationalist, that's all great, excuse me, but is that the standard of player that can come in and replace someone? Now, I think that's a bit derogatory towards Canada and the squad that they've put together. You take a look at guys like Alphonso Davies, who's obviously playing for Bayern Munich. You take a look at the boys, James up front, that was playing in France. There's some really good players in that Canadian squad in the building. It's not just like the way it used to be with Jose Altidore up front. And what do you call him? That's at Rangers with the salute. how he used to get in the squad. They're actually building a team there, and we saw how impressive they were at that tournament. So the fact that this guy is quite highly rated, I'm actually quite excited to see what he brings in. And for me, the one thing that this will probably suit is Tony Ralston, because Tony Ralston will probably be given the jersey at first, and Alistair will be told to try and get the jersey off him. And we've seen when it comes to that, and when Ralston was given the reins last season, it was very difficult to get him out of that position. And if you can develop him even further, that's a good thing on both sides.
It'll be like exactly the same situation as Taylor and Burnaby, probably.
Exactly.
And again, it means that you're retaining a Scottish player in Ralston, because I said this to Paul the other week, it's good to have Scottish players in the first team and playing regularly and influencing guys that are coming in. I did see a quote from somebody saying that who would you compare Alistair Johnston to? And the guy said Danny McGrain. I'm like, steady on now. That's that's like when the guy next to me or the guy behind me compared Raphael Scheidt to Billy McNeil after like one game or something like that. He said, "Oh, look at the way he's running back to the halfway line there. It reminds me of big Billy McNeil." And I was like, right, I think that's probably going to come back to haunt you, that comment. And it did when he was bounced out of the door by Martin O'Neill. But I don't have any doubts as to the caliber of the player, regardless of his nationality. Just he's probably, and he seems to be quite a sound guy. Did you see his video? And he was in a pub in Milan, and he was like zooming in on the Celtic stuff. I know that's a very small thing, but it goes a long way with a lot of people, and he's already sort of probably won over a lot of people with that kind of patter, you know. But you don't play at the World Cup, and you don't play for your international side unless you're a decent player. So, and
Jason Cummings.
Somebody put up and said a year ago Jason Cummings was being substituted for X player away for Dundee away, and then a year later he's like hugging Messi at a World Cup at the end of the game.
Mbappe, as well.
Yeah, that is wild.
And Carly Devlin manages to take home Messi's jersey. You're living in an alternative reality here.
I know, but Johnston started all their games, didn't he? Cummings wasn't starting for Australia. He was there as a squad player and obviously got minutes, and fair play to him. But Johnston was obviously a key element of that side. I did like the guy that was playing in front of him as well, that guy Buchanan. He had a really good game. I forget which game it was, but there was a game where the commentator must have mentioned Buchanan about 30 times. He just kept saying this guy. Like, it made me take notice of him because the commentator kept like sort of bigging him up. So I started watching him, and I don't even know what side he plays for, but he looked really, really good as well. I mean, he might be playing his football in Canada. I don't know. Do you know?
I was looking at.
Don't know off the top of my head. I
was looking at the Moroccan goalkeeper, thinking, I wonder what club he plays for. Heartbroken when it turned out it's Seville that he plays for.
No, really.
I'd have loved to have saw someone as charismatic as him in a Celtic jersey. That would have been superb.
The one I fancied was the Serbian goalkeeper. He looked good. Milinkovic-Savic was his name, same as the outfield player. He plays for Torino. I fancy him. Great with the ball at his feet. Good saving as well. I would definitely take him.
What was the other one? I can't remember who the other one was, but I mean, this is what we're talking about. Obviously, these players get the chance to appear on the stage every couple of years, make a name for themselves. And some of them will end up with some massive moves off the back of the tournament. One player that really, for me, summarise the World Cup is Ochoa for Mexico, because he seems to make a big move every 4 years. He then kind of goes into this sort of hibernation period and then just appears at the World Cup for Mexico, and he's just outstanding. What a fantastic penalty save he made the other day. I'm convinced he's the only Mexican goalkeeper I've ever known in my lifetime, because he's played, I think, at 5 World Cups now.
Is that right?
Ridiculous. Or he's been involved in 5 World Cup squads. It's ridiculous.
What was the name of that player that Sevco signed that was outstanding for his national team, but then was just an alcoholic when he came here? Do you remember?
Pena, Carlos Pena.
Pena. Carlos Pena, that's right.
See the guy that wiped his nose on a pair of Rangers shorts or something like that.
Something like that, yeah. Yeah, on the point of like signing players from Canada and like using that as a derogatory statement against the player, like objectively, that's not true. They finished ahead of the USA in qualifying. They finished ahead of every team in North America in qualifying, and that's teams that have got like players that play for. I'm not even sure if Pulisic is still at Chelsea, but like players like that. So it's not an objective statement. And to be honest, if that sort of snobbery does exist, that gives us an edge, and that's something we should be taking advantage of.
Red Scotland and Pena.
Yeah.
Right. We are halfway through today's show. We've spoke about some of the new signings coming in. We've spoke about the World Cup. We've spoke about some of the signings. But if you cast your mind back, probably 11 months ago now, not 12 months ago, because the winter break has came in a month early this year, myself and Laura Bradburn took an opportunity to look through the squad and the performances so far this season. Excuse me. And what we called the sort of halftime scorecard. And now that I'm joined by Sean and JP this year, we're going to take a look at that once again. We're going to rate the players on a scale of A to F. Hopefully there should be no Fs in here. I went through the squad. Everyone that's going to be rated here will have played at least one game for Celtic this season. And I'll give you some of the stats on that, and we'll have a discussion about each of the players beforehand. So I want you guys that are watching us here on A Celtic State of Mind to get involved in the comments section. Let's have some debate on each of these players and let us know what you would score them. So first of all, we're going to start with Joseph Hart. 6 clean sheets and 21 appearances for Celtic this season. Quite a few people have sort of spoke about maybe it's a position that going forward Celtic will look to strengthen next summer. I think he's someone, JP, who came in when we had a goalkeeper who basically, unlike myself, couldn't catch the cold. And he's offered leadership and solidarity. I sound like Tommy Sheridan there. Leadership and solidarity in the heart of the Celtic defence. He's offered someone to rely on. This season, I don't think he's been as impressive as last year. If I was to give him a rating, I'd probably give him a B for so far this season.
There's no way he's getting an A purely because of that mental pass in the game against. Who was that against? We're away. My God, I can't remember
the away game, Leipzig.
Leipzig away. I mean that. I know that he tried to sort of, I don't know, kind of play it into the. Well, that's the manager. What the manager wants us to play like that, and folk were saying that was him throwing Postecoglou under the bus a bit. I don't really necessarily think that's true. He was obviously just put on the spot and had to say something. But he did, before that, he did put his hands up and say, yeah, it was my mistake. I just think that was such a crucial time in that game because we were in the game at that point, really in the game. And then that happened and it was too big a mountain for us to climb after that against the side of that level and quality. So, but I think his bread and butter in the league, he's in the main been good. I know that any mistake a keeper makes at Celtic gets pounced upon, even if you've got a lot of credit in the bank like Joe Hart has, you'll still get pelters. And he has got pelters. I've seen it online, heard it in the grounds. People, I think, or quite a lot of people would happily, have us replace him at the first opportunity. But I think, like you said, he's brought a lot more to the table than just his playing. I think he's an important part of that team and people do respect him and look up to him as to what he's achieved in the game. So I would agree with you, a B.
B for yourself, JP. Sean, how have you rated Joe Hart this season?
Yeah, I don't really have too much to add that you haven't already said, but I would say if he just signed in the summer, then I'd probably give him an A, but he set a higher standard last year. The thing that he's kept consistent from last year has been his leadership, but his performances have been less consistent, even though they've still been fantastic at times and shaky at others. So I would agree with what all the sentiments you guys are saying. B.
So we're going with a B for Joe Hart. Some of the comments that we've had coming in Polymorphosis agrees with us. Remains a good leader, some great saves, but some poor moments too. Jeez, and looking like a position ready for an upgrade now. George disagrees. He's giving him a D.
Woof.
That's a bit harsh, I think. But
That's very harsh.
everyone's open to an opinion. And James Lafferty says it's been a class signing. Sorry. Fair steady their ship, especially when we had an unsettled centre-back pairing. So that's the views from you guys on Joe Hart. I'm going to move on now to Benjamin Siegrist. And Sean, you never really had much to say there, so I'll let you have the first go there.
Yeah, I actually think I'd give Benjamin Siegrist an A. And not because I think he's been better than Joe Hart, but because I think he's been absolutely perfect in playing his role as a backup goalkeeper, in the sense that he supports Hart, and when he comes in for cup games or so on and so forth, he's been perfect in those games that he has filled in. So not A because he's better than Hart, but A because he has performed his role absolutely to a T.
JP, 2 appearances, 1 clean sheet, both of them cup games. Would you agree with Sean there?
I mean, everybody, I think, was pretty happy that we were signing him as a backup, because he was quite clearly one of the best keepers, if not the best keeper in the league outside of Celtic, and he does kind of fit that mould of being somebody that is probably appreciative of their opportunity to play at a club like Celtic, knows that there's no way he was going to come in and dislodge Joe Hart as the number one. Certainly not straight away. He might have ideas on that. I think he said that at the time, maybe, that he was looking to make the number 1 jersey his own. That was his target. So fair play to him on that front. But anytime I've seen him, he's not let us down in any way. Not looked shaky. He looks confident, just like a lot of the players that come in when they're asked to contribute. And he does that as well.
So what rating are you giving him, sorry?
I'll only say C because he's not really had an opportunity to be A or B. I get an A or a B, so I'd say C.
That's exactly where I'm going. I think I would like to see him try and push for that jersey more. To have that belief about himself that he is every bit as good, if not better, than Joe Hart. That's what I want from a backup goalkeeper. I don't just want someone who's happy to sit on the bench and maybe pick up the odd appearance here and there in the cup. Because we've had Scott Bain doing that for a number of years now, and he's happily doing that as the third choice goalkeeper. So I'd like to see Benji really pushing Joe in the second half of this season. So we've covered the goalkeepers. As I say, Scott Bain hasn't made an appearance this season, so it's not going to be fair to rate him. Let's move on to our defenders and start with Greg Taylor. 20 appearances, 2 goals for Greg Taylor this season. For me, I think he's just continued where he left off last year. I think he's been a solid, reliable option at the back. He's now adding something to his game going forward. JP, I think he's someone who is very influential, coming down that left-hand side and creating a lot of chances for us. And 2 goals for us this season. I think he could end up with another 3 or 4 because he's just so pivotal down that left-hand side. And some of the positions he's getting himself into, you're thinking, right, this isn't Greg Taylor that we signed. This is the Greg Taylor that we've developed at Celtic.
Aye, that's a fair point. I'd straight away just jump straight to an A for Greg Taylor because he's made that left back slot his own, as well as his football and contribution. It seems like he's quite sound as well, like in the dressing room and stuff like that. I think there's a lot of folk have sort of made reference to that. You know, when they do these little interviews with Celtic TV or whatever, Greg Taylor's name comes up quite a lot for things like, I don't know, funniest guy or whatever, things like that. And I know you're not there to be a funny guy and you're getting paid thousands of pounds a week. You're not there to entertain, but it's good for morale. It's good for the fact that he's Scottish as well. And I think as well, it just shows that, I mean, everybody kind of knows that he's got no Celtic background. He's not a Celtic fan. He wasn't a season ticket holder. He wasn't a ball boy or anything like that. He's just come to the club and been given an opportunity when at the start, it kind of looked like he wasn't going to get that because he wasn't anywhere near the first team when he was brought in under Neil Lennon. And now he's a mainstay in the team and easily would be considered an international in that position. If he didn't have what he's got ahead of him in the pecking order in Scotland, like with Andy Robertson and Tierney. So and the amount of times I've come away from games this season and been like, yeah, Jota was good or Kyogo was good, but Greg Taylor was man of the match. Like how he didn't get man of the match in the ground is beyond me, and that's rare that you can be saying that about a left back.
Yeah, Sean. I mean, everyone seems to be joining the Greg Taylor fan club, and with the performances he's putting on this season, it's understandable why.
Yeah, it's crazy how much he's improved. Everyone always kind of liked him to an extent because he was always he never did less than a 6 out of 10. Now he never goes below like 7.5. Like his positional awareness, his reading of the game's gone up a level. Common criticism they used to have was that his final ball was poor. Well, his crossing's gone up a level and his through balls, incisive passing have gone up 2 levels. They've been absolutely outstanding this year. He's got a great partnership with the wingers going, and he's even added goals to his game. Absolutely an A for me.
Just before we move on, I think you have to temper that a little bit with his performance in Madrid wasn't the best, but you have to allow for the quality of the opposition. He was up against some pretty phenomenal talent in their front three. So I wouldn't flamethrower him for his performance in Madrid.
To be fair, JP, I don't think many people's performances in Madrid, us included, was up to standard as well. So,
well, yeah. I mean, I thought Matt O'Reilly played pretty well in Madrid, but as for the rest, look, I know we got beat 5-1. To me, it never felt like a 5-1, and I know we got the goal, and everyone kind of sort of made a bit of a mockery of that goal, but it felt massive at the time.
Yeah.
You were there. You felt it in the ground. It was huge. It proper felt like a boxer on the ropes who was about to go down, but throwing
Fury coming back and standing up after he was knocked down.
Aye, just like throwing one last punch.
Yep.
But it was good.
Some of the comments here: Ben 515 an A for Taylor, Gary Madden A for improvement alone, Robert Highland and the Urban Culture are giving Taylor a B+, and Polymorphosis also comes in to say A+ for Greg Taylor. Always liked him, didn't think he could cut it at Europe, yet he hasn't looked out of place, has exceeded a very good standard that he set last season and is maturing as a man. So some good comments there for Greg Taylor. I'm going to move on to the centre halves and Carl Starfelt. Only 7 appearances so far, a lot of that due to his injuries, but he has picked up 2 goals in that time. Sean, have you been impressed with what you've seen of Carl Starfelt since he's come back from injury?
I've never been a massive fan of Carl Starfelt. I've always thought he's been a decent player, a decent defender. I've never liked the fact that he's plays on the left of the centre backs and can't use his left foot in any way, shape, or form. I know he did score that goal with his left foot that Jared absolutely ripped me for, because I do give him such a hard time for not being able to use his left foot, but it was a tap in, so I'm not giving him any credit. But yeah, he's awkward. He's got a mistake in him, and you see that pretty consistently. And I'm worried that he's going to get. He missed most of the European games this year, and I'd be worried taking him into next year's Champions League if he was still our left centre back. What I'm happy with would be to have him as our backup to Carter Vickers on the right. I'm fine with that. I think he is a good defender. I think he can carry the ball and pass it with his right foot. I just feel like he's not the left centre back we need. Personally, because of the injuries as well, I'd be giving him a C for this season.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that either. I think obviously 2 goals in 7 games is not a bad return, to be perfectly honest. I think he is someone who grows into the position once he's played a number of games, as he showed last season. But is he going to get that opportunity with the likes of Maurice Jens and Cameron Carter-Vickers, and now obviously we're bringing in Kobayashi as well, and Stephen Welsh is there. So we're thinking, will Starfelt kind of live up to his £4 million price tag, JP?
Time will tell. I would go a C as well, again, purely because, like I said before, he's not played enough football to warrant getting an A or a B. And I wouldn't give him an A or a B based on what he's played this season. But I like Starfelt. I know that he does look awkward when he does that kind of, like, he shifts his body and you see him go to pass and you're like, that's got a mistake all over it when he tries to pass it like inside, and it looks really, really dangerous. And he's done it a few times at kind of pivotal moments in games when there's like a collective gasp in the stadium when he does make that pass, and you think that someone's just going to run onto it and nick it off him, or intercept the pass basically. But I do like him. I bumped into him in Waitrose down in Byres Road, and I just said, "I'm looking forward to seeing you back in the hoops, big man." And he went, "Oh, thank you, that's nice." So I wee guyed him. Didn't get a selfie. I didn't go full Declan on him. I just wanted to say all right. And he does get a lot of hassle from some of the support. They don't seem to. They've never. It's like if anybody makes a decision at the start and then they just dig their heels in and go, right, that's it, I'm not liking this guy, like the folk have done with Mooy, and maybe one or two others. But Starfelt seems to really divide the support from everything that I hear and see. That's what I pick up on anyway. But £4 million is a big outlay. I don't think you could argue that we've had value for money out of him. Certainly last season, he was the mainstay with Carter Vickers last season that helped us win 2 trophies. So,
yeah. Sean, I think we're going to have a word with Paul John, because we've got JP shopping in Waitrose with Carl Starfelt. We're kicking about our Aldi's and Lidl's, getting everything in for Christmas, and
not a regular there, by the way. That was a rare moment of flamboyance in my part where I wanted to get.
Told me you were only getting in for the free coffee anyway, JP. Now let's go through some of the comments before we get Sean's opinion. I'm going to come back to this in a minute, because we're actually all getting rated as well, which I wasn't quite set up for, but we'll stick with Starfelt at the second. Vincey3 says B for Starfelt, very rarely lets the side down. Daniel F comes in to say B+. We've seen how much we missed him in the CCV partnership when he was out. Look how many goals we've conceded. That's a very good point. And yeah, let's go into this then. So there have been coaches going around rating us all here. I'm getting a B. I'm too mild-mannered. Thanks. I take that as a compliment. JP, you're getting a C. I've not seen yours yet, Sean. If Colchi wants to come back in. Paddy Lavery saying, I'm getting a C for cough bottle. I could absolutely take that. And the underwater cabbage salesman, you're just winding us all up here. F all round for Axom. Need signings in January. Well, I'll tell you what, we'll be the first ones at the window, JP. Election today. Niall the Punk giving you an A+ for the music chat. So who knows? I mean, not this cup of tea, but we'll take it. Brown Warrior, just after mentioning there Aldi and Lidl, surprised you've not bumped into Peter Lawwell shopping for replacements for the outgoing assets. That was a discussion for last week. I'm still not over that yet, but we'll come back to that in a future show. Sean, we said Cal Starfelt, we're going to give him a C. JP, you're giving him a C as well.
Yep.
Yeah. Any sort of last words?
I think he probably drives an automatic because he can't use his left foot for the clutch.
I just let you
hope he's not watching this.
Okay, so let's move on to our loan signing. Maurice Jens, he's got 19 appearances and 2 goals. For me, he started off quite flaky at first. I think in the pre-season friendlies, he looked very comfortable, very solid, could pick a pass. And then you kind of get that sort of big Scottish striker syndrome where he comes up against a team that's got a big, tall striker and he didn't quite feel the most comfortable in those games. And it kind of knocked his confidence a bit as well. In times in Europe, he's been very solid, and other times he's been almost the weak link in that back four. It's been a hit or miss, but it's definitely looking as if there is a player there that we can extract even more out of. And for that reason, I'm giving him a B. Sean, what's your thoughts on Jens this season?
I thought he started on fire. He was scoring some good goals, driving with the ball when in possession, and for some reason that's just dropped out of his game. I think maybe his confidence took a drop after a few defensive mishaps, like you're talking about. He was kind of not being not as aggressive attacking the ball as I know. I just slagged Starfelt because of his technical ability, but the one thing that he's good at is he will attack the ball generally, and Jens has not been as good at that. To the point where I would probably actually would have Starfelt in the team, preferably. I would probably give Jens a C-, and I wouldn't be looking to keep him next year.
It's an interesting one. For me, I think we're talking, what, £2.5 million? Is that right? Yeah, to get him in next season. I think at that, and he's still quite young as well, I think it's a gamble worth taking, JP.
I don't know if I agree with that. I don't know if he has got it. I kind of like him. He seems like a nice guy, and he's not been terrible. But I can't pinpoint all the occasions where I've kind of went. But there's been a few of them. There's been a few where I've had my doubts, and there's not been many players that I've felt like that about. But I think with Jens, there's been more than 3 or 4 occasions where I've sort of questioned whether or not he's as good as we can get at the back. So I would be surprised if we took up the option to buy him. Might be proved wrong in that. And as I always say, players have got the opportunity to make you look stupid, and so in a couple of years' time, he could be a starting centre half for us. But I don't think he will be.
Just going through the
C for me.
C for you. I do think we are only going to get to cover the goalkeepers and the defenders, so we'll maybe come back to the next week. I don't want to keep everybody here, plus my throat's just about to give up. But Richard Coleman saying Starfelt by Jens, polymorphosis B for Jens. Look, I think he looked great at his best, e.g. the Madrid home game.
It was good in Madrid at home.
Good tackler and distributor, needs to add consistency. He's had a few shaky games. I think we've all mentioned that. Brown Warrior says out of the two, I'd have Jens long term in place of Starfelt, and Paul Andrew Martin gives us a B+ for him. Kind of slightly different to what you guys are thinking. I gave him a B. You guys have given him a C and a C-. So I think the second half of this season will be really important as to whether we spend that £2 million in the summer and whether he comes in as a full-time addition to the squad. I think he's in a good footing towards it, but a couple of big performances, especially in the amount of games that we'll have coming up as the turn of the year, could certainly sway that either way. Cameron Carter-Vickers, 18 appearances, no goals so far this season from the big man, but for me, he's an absolute...
Even at Ibrox.
He is. He's absolutely doing that. For me, he's an absolute rock in that centre-half position, and I was surprised that he didn't get that much game time for America in the World Cup. For me, he's someone that you build a team around, and I would give him an A.
Yep, A+ for me. I think he's one of those ones that's so consistent that you only notice it when he's out the team. And his range of passing is great. There's one game, it was against Dundee United, I think, where there was just like 3 times in 10 minutes he just played the crossfield ball 3 times in a row to Haksabanovic, who had the technical ability to kill it every time, and that's not something that any of our other centre backs offer. And he honestly, he's just great. He did make a couple of mistakes when he was coming back from injury, and I would have, if he hadn't been injured, he'd have been even better. But I'm still giving him an A+ because he's a massive gap in that team, and I believe some people have said he's the best we've had since Van Dijk, and I can't really disagree with that.
Yeah, JP on that boat.
Oh, immense player. Again, I know I said that about Greg Taylor. You know, you come away from games and people have maybe had outstanding games that have scored a goal or set up a goal or both. But as often as you say about Greg Taylor being man of the match, you say it about Carter Vickers as well. Or you hear, he's in the conversation for, how was Carter Vickers not man of the match in that game? Because he just won everything, so strong at the back, very, very calm. I think it was a game at Celtic Park recently where he went to make a tackle and you knew he had no room for an error, and he just cleaned the guy out and got the ball, and the whole place went mental because we just know that we've got somebody at the back that is probably of a level that not close to what Van Dijk has become, but close to what Van Dijk was when he was at Celtic, which was a head and shoulders above anybody else in his position in the league.
I'm going to be quite controversial here. I'm going to say that for all the praise that big Christopher Ayer got, Cameron Carter-Vickers is the defender that Christopher Ayer wanted to be. Yeah. Because when you look at it, I mean, Christopher Ayer and Cameron Carter-Vickers both not blessed with pace, but the positioning that Cameron Carter-Vickers gets himself into, he's always on the right side of the ball. He's always, as you say there, he's always ready to make the tackle. And I very rarely saw him make a late tackle that would cause us any problems. And that was some of the kind of criticisms that Christopher Ayer got when he was at Celtic, the amount of maybe penalties he'd give away because his tackle was late, or fouls he'd give away because it was a late tackle coming in. And if you look at what Christopher Ayers became, and Cameron Carter-Vickers is still really young as well, I think he could definitely, in a couple of years' time, be looking at someone who is in the ballpark of £25 million plus.
It's not beyond. It's not. I mean, given the way that transfers are going now, Calvin Bassey going for close to 20 million. I mean, I'll crack the jokes. If that's what players are going for in the current climate, is it only because he played in a run that led to them going to a European final? Is that what added up to?
It's because he got man of the match in the final.
Seriously, I mean,
yeah.
That's. I mean, I know that's like possibly the reason, but I find that astonishing. And I saw a tweet the other night. I think Ajax were drawing 4 each or something with somebody.
And then they were kind of saying who was wearing the mask when we when Rangers robbed us. So I don't know. I think Carter Vickers is immense, and I really don't want us to sell him. There's all the chat is that we're, don't hang on to your heroes and don't hold. What did he say? He said something like, "Well, everyone's got their heroes, but they're not always going to be here," and stuff like that. So, if there's one player that I don't want us to sell, it's him. I'd love to see him for another season at least, rather than go in January or the summer.
I think did they only play 2 Champions League games? Is that right?
Yeah.
Injury here.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Excuse me. Kaiser HTC, who made his debut on Axom yesterday. Cameron Carter-Vickers is the reason I celebrated Thanksgiving this year, just to say thank you to America for CCV. You can check out Kaiser from yesterday. Look, we're going to get 4 players covered here in the next 2.5 minutes. Let's see how quick we can do that.
Okay.
I'm going to start with Alexander Bernabe. We spoke about Greg Taylor being in there as sort of first choice. Bernabe showed flashes, I think, so far this season, JP, of what he can do. Again, he's probably someone that needs a bit more game time. For that reason, I'd probably give him a B-.
I'd go B. I remember there was a game, and it was an away game, and I forget where it was, but I remember, was it St Johnstone, maybe? I thought he did really well in an away game where he started, and he was really aggressive, always looking to go to bomb forward, offers something different to Taylor, I think, in the way that he plays. And I think you can see that, as you were saying about potentially developing Jens, I think you can see the potential to develop Bernabe into a really top player. I like him.
Yeah.
I like him.
Yeah, C for me. He carries the ball really well when he's dribbling, but his position defending is shocking, and he concedes possession way too often.
So he's made 8 appearances this season. He's got no goals, but he does have plenty of penalty points. Tony Ralston, 9 appearances, no goals so far this season. Again, kind of swapping in and out with Josip Juranovic. Again, so reliable, never lets the side down, and always is looking to get beyond his man and get forward. For me, even in the appearances he's had this season, I'd give him a B+.
I would even extend that to an A. Like, he's another one when he starts a game, he's always a shout for being in contention for man in a match. Unless someone scores 2 or 3 goals, he's in with a shout every time.
Yeah, JP's just so ever reliable at that position, and considering probably 18 months ago he could have been out the door, and I have to hold my hands up. I didn't think that he would ever make it at the club. He's proven everybody wrong.
I don't think many people. Well, I know that Paul and Amy both commended him for his performance against Livingston when we came back from Dubai. He was the one guy I think that got pass marks in that game. But I think obviously where I sit in the ground, I see him, and like if he's on the right side, I see him how he behaves and how he acts. Like if he makes a mistake, he's absolutely raging with himself, and I think to have that, he's obviously got a level of motivation now that he knows that when he gets given a chance, he has to impress, and he as Sean says, he arguably does that all the time. You know, to put himself in the conversation for a man of the match performance. And yeah, he's not flash or anything like that. He doesn't do flash things, but he just adds a kind of steel and determination in that side that. And again, he's Scottish, which I like. So yeah, A for me.
A for you. We move on. We've got 2 players left. Stephen Welsh, 6 appearances, 1 goal. That coming in on the opening day of the season. For me, I think he's someone who really needs a loan spell. Now that we're bringing in Kobayashi, I don't think he's someone that's going to get the game time over the likes of Starfelt, Jens, Karavickers. I think he could potentially be a very good utility option for Celtic, but he needs much more game time before he can do it. For me, and his performances so far this season, I would probably give him a C.
It's a D for me. The only positive contribution he's made was in that opening game, and he needs to go out and get 30 games. And he's not doing much coming in and out of our team, and he was a bit of a liability when he did come into the team in Europe. But I do think he can make it. I just think he needs to go and get a run of games somewhere else.
Yeah. JP, I think that's a kind of common theme. We would want to see him coming through, but he's just not getting that opportunity now. He needs to go. A bit like Mikey Johnson, we've been screaming on Mikey Johnson to go and get a loan spell. He seems to be doing really well in Portugal. Let's see what Welsh can do when he's playing week in and week out.
And like Ralston did as well. Ralston went out on a couple of loan spells. They were maybe the most successful, but maybe he used those loan spells as motivation to succeed at Celtic. You know, because he's been out there and seen what it's like on the other side and gone, I need to screw the nut here. And maybe that attitude led to him getting a deal, because obviously Postecoglou places a lot of emphasis on a player's character and their attitude and things like that. So maybe those loan spells have helped him in a way to get the deal with Celtic that's allowed him to extend his Celtic career. So maybe Stephen Welsh coming out of the comfort zone of Celtic and the environment that's there where everything's cushy, and going and having to be in a sort of a vastly different environment in a way, in a smaller club, then that could give you the determination to succeed. Or it could be the case that he ends up playing really well at that club and they want to sign him, and that's the end of his Celtic career. It's kind of, that's the way it'll probably go.
I think if you're looking at it, if you can get a move to a kind of top 6 team the way that Liam Scales has managed to do, and he's had a good season so far, then that would be a great move for him. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't be looking to play him for a bottom 6 team. I think when we've sort of made those moves, it doesn't really suit the style of football that Celtic want to play, and it's not got that sort of you've got to win every game mentality built into it. So if he can make a move down to the English leagues for a team that's really pushing for promotion, or even come back and finishing his loan spell at Morton that he didn't complete, because Morton are pushing for the title this year with Ayr.
Welsh and Ambrose centre half.
Welsh and Ambrose at centre half. There you go. So what would you give Welsh so far this season then, JP? C. One player left to go. We'll wrap it up after this. Josip Juranovic. I think this one's actually quite controversial because we're speaking about someone who could potentially be moving on for a big fee. But in terms of his performances for Celtic this season, certainly compared to last, I don't think he's kind of lived up to it. I think he's not been as effective. He's not created as much for us, and he's still missed a penalty, which most people have done for Celtic this season. I'm going to give him a B-, to be honest, JP. I think there's so much more that he's shown that he can get out of him, but I don't know if his head's in the right place at the minute.
When you started talking about him, B- was what was in my head to say, because I feel the same way. We all know he's a good player. He's not been terrible, but then at the same time, he's not been the quote-unquote fireball that he was at a lot of the time last season. And maybe it is because he's been distracted by chat of a move, distracted by the World Cup. It's a weird time of the year to have a World Cup, and he would have had full knowledge that he was going to be playing every game for Croatia. So that's a distraction itself. He wasn't going there to be a bit part player. He was going there to play every game, and that would have been his first World Cup, right? He's not played in the World Cup before now, so you can almost allow it a little bit to have that distraction, but that's to our detriment that he's had that distraction. And well, we're all about Celtic, not about whether or not he has a good World Cup for Croatia. We want him to be playing the best football he can for us. So I've made my peace with the fact that he's leaving. I know it's not come out and it's not official, but it's almost certain that he'll be gone next month. I just hope maybe he gets to have some sort of send off, because I don't think he should just leave out the sort of side door, so to speak, because he's been a popular player. He's contributed massively to getting the league title back last season after one of the worst years of my life. So I don't think he should just meekly move away and not have a bit of fanfare, and hopefully gets it.
And we'll always have that Panenka in Europe as well.
Yeah, I'll just quickly wrap up, and I'll slightly higher and say he's on a B, because there's at least 2 occasions in the Champions League where I was thinking, 2 goals rather, where I was thinking if Ralston's on instead of Juranovic, we don't concede that goal. Having a more physical defender there. But yeah, if he does stay, which seems unlikely based on the chat, then I would actually be happy for him to shift over to be our backup left back and send Bernabe out on loan instead.
It's an interesting one. It'd be interesting to see if he does hang around in this January.
What are folks saying about Juranovic in the comments?
Let's see what we've got in the comments just before we wrap up. Uncle Nobby's Steamboat Fireball to Fanny Boys is probably the funniest one. Studs Lanigan saying dreadful lack of music chat today, guys. Well, we'll be back next week. Don't worry about that. Beach Boys saying JJ's played better for Croatia in 2 weeks than what he has done for Celtic all season. I think that's generally the sort of consensus. Polymorphosis, JJ's a B for me. Seems to have the elite tools, but doesn't translate it to an end product. Still does quiet things very well. Bit of a weird one. I agree with that. As I said, I feel as if there's so much more we can get out of him, but he's just not showing it. It's almost as if he's holding back a bit this season.
Heads out the door.
No, there's no sort of get out the door for him. So
No. I mean, his head's out the door.
Oh, his head's out the door. Sorry, I thought we were looking to see if there was anybody that was wanting him going, but no, all good. Yeah, it's been an interesting discussion in the second half. We'll have to reconvene and do the midfielders and the forwards again at another show. Thank you very much to JP and for Sean for carrying me today. I'm away to get a hot water bottle and wrap up well. We'll see how we
There he goes.
you know what I mean? Thank you very much for joining us. We're delighted to be over 20,000 subscribers. Please continue to like and share and comment. Let us know what you liked, what you didn't like, and we'll try to put the best show on as we can as possible. Thank you once again for joining us on A Celtic State of Mind. Until tomorrow, take care, stay safe, and as always, get well.
Get well soon.